Welcome to The Explainer. Let's just cut right through the massive amount of hype out there and demystify all those confusing buzzwords surrounding automation and AI agents. If you've been wondering how to actually practically implement these new topologies in your organization without, completely breaking your existing systems, you are in exactly the right place. Okay, here's our roadmap. We're going to cover the automation illusion, the three paradigms of work, the spectrum of autonomy, agentic design patterns, and finally, guarding the workflow. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The automation illusion, breaking the brittleness of traditional systems.
We really have to start here, because the way we talk about automation right now, it's kind of fundamentally broken. We so often conflate any form of a computer doing work for us as just automation. But traditional automation relies on highly brittle trigger action logic. It just executes a defined sequence based on predefined rules. You know the drill. If condition X is met, do action Y. It has absolutely zero judgment. This means if an app's UI changes even slightly, or someone uploads a weird data format, bam, the entire system breaks instantly. It's essentially just a rigid flowchart that executes itself.
So, to truly grasp agentic workflows, you've got to shift your mental model. We need to stop thinking of software as just a passive tool, like a hammer or a strict recipe you have to write out step by step. Instead, start thinking of it as hiring a digital colleague. You're hiring a specialist. Section 2. Three paradigms of work: clerk, intern, and chief of staff.
We can basically categorize these workflows into two extremes, with an AI-native stepping stone right in the middle. Over on the left, you've got standard People Process Technology, or PPT. This is highly deterministic, it uses hard-coded logic and rigid APIs. Then, all the way on the right, you have Agentic Native. This uses probabilistic reasoning. Instead of mapping out every single step, you just give the system a goal and it dynamically uses tools to figure out the best path forward. This brilliantly illustrates the shift using a human resourcing analogy. Standard PPT, that's your data entry clerk. You hand them a strict standard operating procedure, and if an edge case pops up, they freeze and ask for help. The middle step, AI native, is like your subject matter expert intern. They're fantastic at reading and summarizing massive documents, kind of acting as a co-pilot, but you still make the final call. But agentic native, that is your autonomous chief of staff. You give them a high-level goal, literally hand them the keys to the tools, and they just report back when the whole shebang is done.
Let's look at a real enterprise example. Imagine managing a sudden massive spike in cloud spend. With standard tools, the system just flags the anomaly, sends an email, and that's it. A human actually has to wake up, dig through the logs, find the rogue cluster, and manually terminate it. But an autonomous FinOps agent, it detects that spike, spawns a subagent to query the logs, discovers the infinite loop, verifies it against your enterprise budget guardrails, safely shuts down the cluster, and logs a full post-mortem report into Jira, entirely on its own before your engineers even pour their morning coffee. Absolutely wild.
Section 3. The spectrum of autonomy. How to measure a workflow's needs.
You really shouldn't treat AI adoption as this binary choice. Like it's either we write standard code or we unleash a sci-fi AI agent. Autonomy isn't a simple on-off switch. There are actually 5 distinct tiers of autonomy here. It ranges from pure deterministic execution down at Tier 1, all the way up to fully autonomous self-healing operations at Tier 5. We have to grade our specific workflow needs to avoid over-engineering, like paying for an expensive AI agent to do basic math, or under-engineering, like trying to use brittle if-then statements to read messy, unstructured customer emails.
You can actually use this workflow modernization scoring matrix to objectively calculate your needs. You score your process across 5 dimensions: data, logic, execution, exceptions, and volatility. For instance, if your data is perfectly structured in SQL tables, great, you score a 1. But if you're dealing with free-form emails and random voice recordings, you score 5. Tallying these scores up tells you exactly whether you need a simple standard script, a cognitive copilot, or a full-blown multi-agent topology.
If you want a quick shortcut, just use this 2-question discovery framework. Question 1. Is the input data unstructured? And question 2. Does the process require multi-step reasoning, tool usage, and self-correction? Ultimately, if your inputs vary significantly and require real judgment, like, say, interpreting an auditor's PDF report and applying a code fix to a staging environment, an agentic workflow is going to handle this so much better than a brittle rule system ever could.
Section 4. Agentic Design Patterns. peeking under the hood of agentic workflows.
Instead of executing a fixed linear script, an agentic system relies on a highly dynamic loop. This is often called a react loop, reasoning and acting. The agent receives a goal, plans its steps, takes an action using a tool, observes the result, and then, this is key, it reflects. So, if a tool returns a 400 bad request error, the agent actually reads it, realizes its syntax was wrong, adjusts the payload, and tries again. It's continuously learning and correcting within the task itself.
AI pioneer Andrew Ng outlines 4 foundational patterns for these workflows. First up, reflection. Basically, letting agents critique their own work to improve it. Second is tool use, giving them API access to do things like search the web or execute code. Third is planning, prompting the LLM to break a massive complex task into a logical sequence. And finally, multi-agent collaboration, creating specialized roles, like having a researcher agent working right alongside a summarizer agent.
Now, when you're selecting these patterns, you really have to weigh the trade-offs. Basic tool use is low latency, predictable in cost, and highly reliable. But multi-agent collaboration? Well, that has the highest latency, the highest cost risk from massive token usage, and frankly, it's the hardest to control. You should always start simple. Only scale up to the cost and complexity of multi-agent collaboration when roles truly fundamentally diverge.
For example, imagine you're building an automated pull request triage tool for your dev team. Begin with basic tool use. Just let the agent call an API to fetch the PR metadata and code coverage. Simple. Only layer in reflection if the agent makes verifiable mistakes, like, suggesting former employees as code reviewers, and absolutely avoid building a massive multi-agent swarm unless you truly need completely separate roles, like a dedicated security auditor agent pushing back against a performance testing agent.
Section 5. Guarding the agentic workflow, closing with the reality check.
Okay, to put these agents into production safely and to prevent absolute disasters, you must avoid these common anti-patterns. First, don't write a God prompt. That's trying to cram every single instruction and edge case into one massive, monolithic text block. Avoid over-agentification, too. Don't use an expensive LLM when a super fast, cheap deterministic script works perfectly fine. And definitely beware of uncontrolled recursion. That's where an agent gets stuck in an infinite loop trying to solve an impossible error, just racking up massive API bills while you sleep.
To manage this risk, you have to implement bounded execution. You absolutely must cap the number of tool calls an agent can make. Implement circuit breakers. And don't just check the final output. You need to layer strict guardrails at every single step of the process, validating user inputs, verifying the data returning from tool responses, and ensuring the final action is 100% safe before it ever even touches your production environment.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to ask yourself a question the next time you're evaluating a business process. Are you just going to write another brittle, step-by-step recipe that's almost certainly going to break tomorrow? Or are you ready to securely hire your first digital specialist? The choice you make here is literally going to define the future of your workflows.